Okay, let's begin. It's 1979. Let's go back to 1979. A film called The Kirlian Witness. Now, this is a very obscure film, an extremely obscure film. It has an alternate title, a sort of subtitle. The Plants Are Watching. And it is a fairly small-scale, low-budget film, which shows, and it's not particularly good. It's not a particularly good film. Lots of bad acting, lots of bad production, and a ridiculous storyline. So, let's get into this. A young lady, Laurie, is hooked on the idea that plants can communicate with her through telepathy. So she surrounds herself with pot plants of many kinds, and she tends to them. And she is convinced that plants can warn her about things, such as her sister Rilla's boyfriend, Robert, being a bad person. And then Laurie is found dead on the rooftop one morning. Rilla suspects this is not an accident. The only witness is one of Laurie's plants. Now, Rilla has to get to the bottom of this by communicating with the plant. So she researches this possibility in a local bookshop. She picks up a copy of the book, The Secret Life of Plants, 1973, by Peter Tompkins and Christopher Bird. Now, this is a book that actually does exist. And incidentally, it is the basis of a 1979 documentary of the same name, The Secret Life of Plants. And the soundtrack to that documentary was done by Stevie Wonder and later released as his 1979 album, Journey Through the Secret Life of Plants, which completely confused any Stevie Wonder fan up to that point. Stevie Wonder musically translated the book and film into song, the concepts in the book. Most of the tracks on his album feature the first use on record of a digital sampling synthesizer, the computer music Melodian. Now, the Melodian was based on a Digital Equipment Corporation, a DEC PDP-8 computer, plus a lot of hand-wired DAC and digital analog converters and analog to digital converters and tracking anti-aliasing filters to form a monophonic synthesizer with 12-bit sampling at 22 kilohertz plus 22k. And it was designed to be compatible with analog synthesizers, and it had features to pitch track an analog synthesizer such as an ARP 2600, and it was very, very well integrated with an ARP's touch ribbon control and things like that. Anyway, the Stevie Wonder album is believed to be the second digitally recorded pop music album ever. And the book, coming back to the book, The Secret Life of Plants, which is what the documentary that the album was based on, the book includes summaries of the life and work of 20th century scientists Jagadish Chandra Bose and Corentin Louis Kevran, as well as 19th century scientist George Washington Carver. Now, the book details experiments on plant stimuli using a polygraph, which we know of as a lie detector, a method which was pioneered by Cleve Baxter. And the book is generally criticised as pseudoscientific nonsense and should be categorised as fiction. I would tend to agree with that. Now, coming back to the film that I'm talking about, the film, The Kirlian Witness, 1979, expands on this in terms of a horror film. Rilla, who happens to be a photographer, embarks on a fairly tedious adventure of attaching polygraphs to plants and developing and rigging the equipment necessary to take Kirlian photographs of plants. Now, this is where it gets a bit interesting. Or is it just interesting for me? I don't know. Kirlian photography is a photographic technique developed in 1939 by Semyon Kirlian and his wife Valentina, who discovered that if a photographic plate... Now, bearing in mind this is 1939, so a photographic plate wasn't a plastic thing. It would have been a glass plate with an emulsion painted onto the glass. In the dark, obviously. And if you put a high voltage source underneath the glass photographic plate and then place an object on top of that to make a contact print, in the dark, obviously, and then develop the photographic plate, it would generate a corona discharge image around where the object touched the plate. So they developed lots of... They experimented with anything and everything, as particularly live things, and, for example, plants. The Kirlians placed all sorts of objects on top of these plates with high voltage discharge electrodes. Living matter such as leaves and other plant material was a favourite subject, especially where you cut a piece of the plant and it would show the aura, which is we now know as a corona discharge, plus the shape of where the plant that you'd cut used to be. Now this some belief that the aura had some kind of metaphysical significance, whereas in truth it was literally just corona discharge, and it was highly variable. So they were looking at all the colours when they were doing colour processing on this, thinking, oh, this is the colour of the aura. Actually, no, it's probably more likely the variability of the contact on the photographic plate and the variability of the processing of it. But anyway, this work was fairly unknown until 1970, when two Americans, Lynn Schroeder and Sheila Ostrander, published a book, Psychic Discoveries Behind the Iron Curtain. Now, high-voltage electrophotography soon became known to the general public as Kirlian photography. Although little interest was generated among Western scientists, Russians held a conference on the subject in 1972 at Kazakh State University. Early in the 1970s, Thelma Moss and Kendall Johnson at the Centre for Health Sciences at the UCLA conducted extensive research into Kirlian photography. Moss led an independent and unsupported parapsychology laboratory that was shut down by the university in 1979, so a little bit of Ghostbuster-y type stuff going on there. The Kirlian Witness, a ridiculous film, very obscure. Have fun watching it. Goodbye, thank you everyone.